Zoe learned the sound of abandonment in the quietest way, not through shouting, not through slammed doors, but through an empty driveway that stayed empty, through a phone that stopped lighting up, through a promise that didn't come back with the sunrise. John left like a storm that refused to explain itself. One day he was there, hands warm, voice certain, plans spoken like vows. And the next, he was gone, chasing a future he swore would fix everything. He said he needed time, space, success, as if love could be paused like a song and resumed when convenient. At first, Zoe waited the way people wait for miracles, with hope pressed tightly between her ribs, counting weeks like prayers, telling herself that good men return, that real love doesn't disappear, it just gets delayed. But seasons don't stop for broken hearts. Harvest came, winter followed, then another spring, and with each passing year, Zoe changed, not into someone bitter, but into someone awake, someone who stopped living on maybe. She built strength in places John never bothered to look. She grew roots in the very soil where he had left her standing alone. And then, on the day she finally stopped waiting, the day she stopped checking the road, stopped rehearsing explanations, stopped saving a space in her life for a man who chose to leave, that's when the town saw him again. A car rolling slow down Main Street, a familiar silhouette stepping out like a ghost from another lifetime. John, older, quieter, dressed like success, but carrying something heavier than a suitcase in his eyes. Zoe didn't run. She didn't collapse. She simply stood there with the kind of calm that comes from surviving. Because she had learned the hardest truth. You can't beg someone to choose you, and you can't heal while your heart is still waiting at the door. But when John finally looked at her, really looked, the air between them tightened with every year he had missed. Regret didn't have to speak. It showed itself in his face. And Zoe felt the past rise like a wave threatening to pull her under. He had returned, not as the man who left, but as someone who looked like he'd been broken and rebuilt. And the question that no one in that small town dared to say out loud was the same question beating in Zoe's chest. Was it too late? Stay with this story until the end. Because what John does next isn't a grand speech or a dramatic apology. It's the kind of redemption that has to be earned day by day in a town that remembers everything, and in the heart of a woman who finally learned how to choose herself first. The town of Willow Creek carried its peace like a secret. Quiet roads lined with fields, a diner where everyone knew your name, and sunsets that made even the tired feel forgiven. Zoe had always believed safety lived here, not because life was easy, but because love had always felt close. With John, it felt closer. He was the kind of man who made ordinary days feel like a promise. And for a while, she thought that was enough. They were young in the way small towns keep you young, dreaming big while standing on familiar ground. John talked about building something that would outgrow Willow Creek, something that would make him matter beyond the county line. Zoe listened, not because she needed grandness, but because she believed in him. She believed in the version of John who held her hand in the church parking lot, whispering plans like prayers. She believed that ambition could live beside love. Zoe worked long shifts at the small local hospital, the kind that served farm injuries and winter fevers, where nurses became family to the whole town. She was steady, capable, the one people trusted when panic filled the room. John admired that steadiness, even if he didn't always understand it. He loved her strength, until it made him feel small. And sometimes, love turns dangerous when pride starts talking louder than devotion. The night everything changed didn't arrive with warning. It came dressed like a normal evening, cold air, the smell of supper, the soft glow of the porch light as Zoe stepped inside. John was at the kitchen table, papers spread out like a battlefield, jaw tight, eyes too bright. He didn't look up right away. And Zoe knew before a word was spoken that something had already been decided. "I got an offer," he said, voice controlled in that way men use when they're trying not to shake. He told her about a business opportunity in the city, a partnership, a fast track toward the life he'd always claimed he wanted. His words sounded polished, rehearsed, like he'd been practicing them alone. Zoe set her bag down slowly, heart loud in her ears. The offer wasn't the problem. The way he said it was. She asked the simplest question. When would you go? And the silence that followed felt like betrayal. John finally looked up and Zoe saw it. Fear wrapped in confidence, pride pretending to be purpose. Soon, he said. Not we, not us, not together. Just soon. And in that single word, Zoe felt the floor shift beneath everything she had trusted. I need to do this, John continued, leaning back like he wanted distance even from his own confession. I can't stay here forever. I can't be stuck. Zoe flinched at that word. Stuck. Because she had never seen her life as a trap. She saw it as a home, as service, as belonging. But John's eyes didn't soften. It was like he was talking himself into believing his own reasons. Zoe tried to stay calm the way she stayed calm in emergency rooms. Why does it have to be without me? She asked. Her voice didn't crack, but something inside her did. John's fingers tapped the edge of the table, impatient, as if her love was an obstacle to his future. Because you wouldn't come, he said too quickly. You're tied to this place. You're tied to that hospital. You're tied to everyone. Zoe swallowed hard. She wasn't tied. She was committed. There was a difference, and she wanted him to understand that. She wanted him to see how much strength it took to care for people who had nothing but hope and a small-town clinic. She wanted him to respect her purpose the way she respected his dreams. But John wasn't looking for respect tonight. He was looking for permission to leave. So that's it? Zoe asked, standing now, because sitting felt like surrender. John stood too, but the space between them stayed wide. It's not like that, he said, though his tone offered no alternative. I'll come back, when it's stable, when I've built something, when I'm ready. Zoe stared at him, searching for love inside those sentences. All she found was delay. Ready for what? She asked. Ready to love me? Ready to choose us? John's jaw tightened like her questions were unfair. Ready to be a man you can be proud of, he snapped, and immediately regretted the sharpness. But the damage was done. Zoe felt something in her chest go still. Because she had been proud of him when he was nothing but potential, and he had treated that devotion like it didn't count. The next morning, the house smelled like coffee and endings. John moved quietly, packing like he didn't want to wake the life he was abandoning. Zoe stood in the doorway, not crying, not begging, not collapsing into the kind of scene people imagine love requires. She watched him fold shirts and zip a bag, watched him avoid her eyes as if looking at her would make him stay. He spoke in fragments. It's just for a while. I'll call. I'll be back. Zoe didn't answer those promises. She had learned, even then, that words were the cheapest part of leaving. When John finally stepped toward her, hesitating like he expected her to stop him, Zoe lifted her chin. Don't make this harder by pretending, she said softly. Her voice wasn't cruel. It was clear. If you're going, then go. But don't leave me holding a future you're not sure you want. John's face flickered. Pain, guilt, something that almost looked like love. He reached out, fingers brushing her wrist like a question. Zoe, he started. But her eyes held him steady, and he stopped. Because how do you explain selfishness to someone who's only ever been faithful? How do you justify abandoning a heart that never asked you to be perfect, only present? He walked out, and the door clicked shut with a sound so small it felt impossible that it could change a life. But it did. Zoe stood there staring at the empty space he left behind, waiting for the rush of tears. They didn't come right away. Instead, there was numbness, quiet, cold, practical, like her body was trying to protect her from the full weight of what had happened. Outside, John's car pulled away slowly. Zoe watched from the window as it disappeared down the road toward the highway, toward the world he believed would make him whole. The town stayed still as if even Willow Creek held its breath. Zoe pressed her palm to the glass, not as a plea, but as a goodbye. She refused to speak aloud, and when the car turned the corner and vanished, she felt the first true ache of abandonment. She went to work that day anyway. She walked into the hospital with steady steps, tied her hair back, and took care of strangers like her own heart wasn't bleeding. People asked where John was. Zoe answered with simple words. He left for work. Not because she wanted to protect him, but because she refused to let her pain become gossip. She refused to be pitied. She refused to be reduced to the woman who got left. That night, alone in the quiet house, Zoe sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the truth land fully. John didn't leave because he didn't love her at all. He left because he loved himself more than he feared losing her. And in the silence, Zoe made a promise. Not to him, but to herself. She would grieve, she would heal, she would grow. And she would never again mistake someone's absence for a love story. The first week after John left, Zoe lived on autopilot. She woke before dawn like she always had, showered, dressed, and drove to the hospital with the same steady hands that had held frightened patients through long nights. Only now, the steadiness was survival. The roads looked the same, the fields still slept under morning mist, and Main Street still opened its doors like nothing had changed. But inside Zoe, everything had shifted. At work, she became even quieter, not because she didn't feel, but because she felt too much. Her coworkers tried to soften their voices around her, as if grief was something fragile that might shatter if spoken to directly. She thanked them with small smiles and kept moving. She checked vitals, changed bandages, comforted the elderly, and spoke gently to children who feared needles. Caring for others became the only place her heart didn't echo. At home, the silence was heavier. John's toothbrush still sat by the sink, accusing her with its normalcy. A jacket hung on the back of the chair as if he'd be home any minute. Zoe didn't throw anything away. Not yet. She wasn't clinging. She was adjusting. There's a difference between refusing to let go and needing time to understand what has been taken from you. The calls didn't come like he promised. The first night, her phone stayed quiet until midnight. The second, it stayed quiet until dawn. By the third night, Zoe stopped leaving the ringer on. She placed her phone face down and tried to sleep. When sleep wouldn't come, she sat on the porch steps wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wind move through the bare branches like whispered questions. How do you move forward when your future just walked away? The town noticed. In Willow Creek, people don't pry out loud, but they watch with soft eyes. Mrs. Halstead from the bakery sent over cinnamon rolls. Because you work too hard. A neighbor offered to fix the porch light that had started flickering. Someone left a bag of fresh eggs at her door. No one mentioned John directly. They just surrounded Zoe with quiet proof that abandonment wasn't the same as being alone. Still, grief has its own schedule. Some mornings, Zoe felt almost fine. Clear-headed, focused, grounded. Other mornings, she caught herself setting 2 mugs on the counter before realizing she only needed 1. That small mistake hit her like a wave. She would stand there staring at the extra mug, heart tightening as if the house itself was reminding her, the life you planned is gone, but you're still here. One evening, she finally opened the closet where John's side still looked lived in. She stood there for a long time, fingers brushing the fabric of shirts she once folded while laughing at something he said. She didn't cry at first. She breathed. She let the memories come without fighting them. Then slowly the tears arrived. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady. The kind of tears that feel like the body releasing poison. And when the tears stopped, something surprising happened. Zoe felt anger, not wild, not destructive, but clean and sharp. Anger is sometimes the first sign that a person has begun to value themselves again. She thought of John leaving without a real conversation, without a plan, without honoring what they had built. She thought of how he'd spoken about her purpose like it was a chain, and she realized with painful clarity that she had spent too long proving she was worth staying for. The next day, Zoe asked for extra shifts. Not because she wanted to punish herself, but because she wanted to build momentum. She opened a savings account with her name alone. She paid off a small debt John had promised to handle. She fixed the porch light herself. Each task was small, but each one carried a message. You are capable. You are not waiting for rescue. You are rebuilding. At the hospital, a new case came in that changed the shape of her weeks. A farm worker had collapsed in the field, dehydrated and exhausted because he'd been avoiding the hospital due to costs and fear. Zoe sat with his wife in the hallway, listening to her speak through tears about bills, about children. about how hard it was to get help in a town where everyone worked themselves into the ground. Something in Zoe's chest tightened. Not with sorrow this time, but with purpose. That night, Zoe pulled out a notebook and started writing. Not poetry, not heartbreak. Plans. She wrote about preventative care, about community outreach, about a small mobile clinic that could travel to farms and remote areas. She didn't know how she would do it yet, but for the first time since John left, she felt her future forming again. Something that belonged to her, not to what he had promised. She didn't talk about it to anyone at first. She simply started showing up differently. She asked questions in staff meetings. She researched grants. She called neighboring counties to learn what programs existed. She stayed late after her shift, not because she was desperate for distraction, but because she was building a new identity from the ashes of the old one. She wasn't becoming harder. She was becoming clearer. John sent a message 2 weeks later. A short one. Something like, "Busy. Settling in. Hope you're okay." Zoe stared at it for a long time. It wasn't cruel. It was worse than cruel. It was casual, as if her heart was something you checked on like a plant you left behind. Zoe typed a response, then deleted it. She could have poured out her pain in a paragraph that would make him feel guilty. But she didn't want guilt. She wanted maturity. And she wasn't going to beg for that either. Instead, she wrote back with dignity so sharp it almost trembled. "I'm working. I'm fine. I hope you find what you're looking for." Then she put her phone away and went for a walk down the road, under a sky heavy with late-season clouds. The air smelled like rain. Her boots pressed into the dirt with a steady rhythm. Each step felt like a decision. Not to hate him, not to chase him, just to keep moving. A storm hit Willow Creek that weekend. Wind tore through the trees and rain battered the town like a warning. The hospital filled with emergencies, slips, cuts, a barn roof collapsing. Zoe worked for nearly 18 hours straight, moving like a steady flame in the chaos. At one point, she paused in a hallway, drenched in sweat and exhaustion, and realized something. She was doing this without him. She was holding the world together without the man she once believed she couldn't live without. When she finally went home, power was out in half the town. Her house was dark, cold, quiet. Zoe lit candles and sat at the kitchen table, wrapping her hands around a cup of tea she couldn't really taste. The flickering candlelight made shadows dance on the walls, and for the first time, she didn't feel haunted by the emptiness. She felt present. She had been abandoned, yes, but she was not undone. That night, Zoe made the decision that marked the end of her waiting. She gathered John's remaining vichet, his jacket, his books, the spare set of keys he'd left on the counter, and placed them in a box. Not with rage, not with ceremony, but with calm. She didn't erase him from her life, she simply removed him from her daily space. She carried the box to the closet and set it on the highest shelf. Then she stood in the center of the living room and spoke softly to the quiet air, as if the house needed to hear it too. "I'm not saving a life for someone who chose to leave." The words didn't make her feel instantly healed, but they made her feel honest. And that honesty, more than hope, became the first real breath of her new beginning. Time didn't heal Zoe in one grand moment. It healed her the way seasons change, slowly enough that you don't notice until you look back and realize the air is different. Willow Creek watched her move through the months with quiet respect. She didn't become a woman who got over it. She became a woman who grew around it. Like a tree that keeps stretching toward the sun even after lightning has split its trunk. By the time a full year had passed, Zoe's routines had changed in ways John would no longer recognize. She still worked at the hospital, but she wasn't only surviving shifts anymore, she was leading them. New nurses leaned on her calm. Doctors trusted her instincts. Families knew her by name. She became the steady pulse in a place where fear often entered first. And inside that steadiness, something new took root. Ambition that wasn't desperate, just purposeful. The notebook she once filled in grief became her blueprint. Zoe didn't talk about her idea like a dream. She treated it like a mission. In a small town, people fall through cracks because the cracks are wide and quiet. Farms too far from the clinic, families too proud to ask for help. men who worked through pain until the pain won. Zoe had watched it happen too many times, so she started building something that would reach them before disaster did. It began with one Saturday a month. Zoe convinced the hospital administrator to let her host a free wellness day at the community center. Blood pressure checks, diabetes screenings, simple consults. She called local churches, asked them to spread the word, and promised she'd do the work if they'd provide folding tables and coffee. People showed up hesitant, then relieved, then grateful. And Zoe realized what heartbreak had given her: a hunger to protect others from being left alone in their worst moments. The town started to talk, not about John's absence anymore, but about Zoe's presence. Mrs. Halstead put a small jar on the bakery counter labeled, "For Zoe's Outreach." Farmers dropped in bills without saying a word. The diner owner offered free meals for volunteers. Even the high school kids showed up to carry chairs and direct traffic. Zoe didn't ask for pity, and that's why people offered support. In Willow Creek, the strongest women don't get rescued. They get respected. There were nights when she still felt the ache of what could have been. But the ache didn't control her anymore. It came like distant thunder, real, but far away. Zoe learned how to sit with loneliness without becoming it. She learned that missing someone isn't the same as needing them. That difference changed her posture, her voice, the way she looked at her own future. Another year passed. The outreach program grew into a small mobile unit funded by grants Zoe fought for like her life depended on it. A retired nurse volunteered. A young doctor from a nearby county joined on weekends. They traveled along back roads, stopping at farms where families had gone years without checkups. Zoe wore a jacket with the hospital logo and a clipboard in her hands, and she felt something deep and steady. She wasn't just healing bodies. She was restoring dignity. She also rebuilt her home, not with expensive renovations, but with meaning. She painted the kitchen walls a warm shade of cream, the kind that caught light like hope. She planted wildflowers along the walkway. She fixed the porch swing that had once sat unused after John left. And one early spring morning, she sat there with a cup of coffee and realized she was smiling without forcing it. Her life didn't look like the one she planned with John, but it was real. And it was hers. Zoe dated no one seriously, not because she was stuck, but because she was careful. She had learned the cost of attaching her heart to potential. She wasn't interested in charm or promises. She wasn't looking for someone to complete her. She was looking for someone who could stand beside a woman already whole. And in a town as small as Willow Creek, that kind of clarity made people treat her differently, like she carried a boundary you didn't cross lightly. Late that summer, Zoe attended a town council meeting to propose something bigger: a permanent expansion of rural care services, a partnership that would bring better equipment and more staff to Willow Creek. She spoke without shaking, voice calm but firm, eyes bright with purpose. Men twice her age listened, women nodded. The mayor leaned forward. When she finished, there was a silence, then applause, not loud, but deep. Zoe felt her heart steady. She wasn't asking for permission to matter. She already did. After the meeting, an older man approached her, Mr. Granger, one of the largest farm owners outside town. He had once been known for being difficult, stubborn, proud. Now his expression was softened by something close to gratitude. "My wife would have been alive if we'd caught it sooner," he said quietly. "What you're doing, it matters." Zoe didn't know what to say. She simply nodded and held his gaze. Sometimes healing isn't about fixing the past. Sometimes it's about refusing to let it repeat. That night, Zoe drove home under a sky scattered with stars. The fields stretched dark and peaceful on either side of the road. She rolled down her window and let the warm air rush in. The wind smelled like cut hay and distant rain, and for the first time in a long time, Zoe felt something that surprised her: gratitude, not for the pain, but for the woman the pain had built. John still existed in the background of her life like a name on an old photograph. Occasionally, a message came. Short updates, vague apologies without depth. Zoe didn't answer most of them. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. She had learned that a person can miss you and still not deserve access to you. She had learned that contact without accountability is just another way to keep a door half open. Then, One crisp afternoon near the start of fall, Zoe stood outside the hospital loading supplies into the mobile unit. Leaves were beginning to turn along the road, gold and rust like the world was catching fire softly. A nurse beside her checked the clipboard and said, "Did you hear?" Zoe didn't look up. "Hear what?" The nurse's eyes flicked toward Main Street. "Someone big is coming back to town." Zoe paused, hands still on the box she was lifting. "Who?" she asked, even though something in her chest already knew. The nurse shrugged. "They say he's successful now. City success, investors, big deals. His family's been whispering about it for weeks." Zoe swallowed hard, but her face stayed calm. People loved stories like that. Boys who left small towns and returned like legends. But Zoe wasn't interested in legends. She was interested in character. That evening, the diner was louder than usual, buzzing with the kind of excitement that feeds on rumor. Zoe sat in a corner booth with a bowl of soup and a stack of grant papers. She overheard fragments. "He made it. He's back. It's been years. He's different now." Zoe's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. She didn't turn. She didn't ask questions. But her heartbeat changed rhythm, like her body recognized the shadow of a name before her mind allowed it. She drove home and found herself standing on the porch without realizing she'd stopped there. The porch swing creaked gently in the evening breeze. The sky was bruised purple, the first cold promise of winter rising in the air. Zoe stared down the road, not because she was waiting. She'd stopped waiting long ago. But because the past has a way of returning when you least expect it, dressed as if it has the right. Inside her house, Zoe set her keys on the counter and exhaled slowly. She wasn't the same woman John left. She wasn't built to break that way anymore. If he returned, he wouldn't find a girl still holding his memory like a candle. He would find a woman with a life full of light. And somewhere deep in Zoe's chest, a question formed, quiet but sharp. If he came back now, what would he even be returning to? John didn't return to Willow Creek like a hero. There was no announcement, no parade of familiar faces rushing to greet him, no dramatic moment staged for an audience. He came back the way people come back when they carry regret, quietly, almost cautiously, as if the town itself might reject him. His car rolled down Main Street at a speed that felt like hesitation, and when he passed the diner, he didn't look at the windows. He looked straight ahead, jaw tight, hands gripping the steering wheel like he was holding himself together. He had imagined this road 1,000 times, in the city, in boardrooms, in hotel rooms that smelled like money and loneliness. He had pictured Willow Creek as an easy place to return to. But now, with the familiar storefronts and the old clock tower coming into view, he realized the truth. The town hadn't been small because it lacked value. It had been small because it didn't need to prove itself. The only one who had needed proving was him. John's success was real. His suit was tailored, his watch expensive, his phone buzzing with messages he didn't answer. He had built what he went to build: investments, partnerships, a name that carried weight in places Willow Creek would never see. But success had not softened the ache he carried. It hadn't replaced the woman he left. It hadn't erased the nights he woke up with the taste of guilt in his mouth, remembering Zoe's face in that doorway, calm, wounded, refusing to beg. He parked near the edge of town and stepped out into air that smelled like soil and coming winter. His breath fogged in front of him, and for a second he just stood there. He listened. No sirens, no city hum, only wind and distance and the faint sound of a dog barking somewhere far away. The quiet didn't comfort him the way it used to. It judged him, because quiet leaves room for the things you've been avoiding. John's mother had called him 2 days earlier. Her voice carried the gentle warning she always tried to hide behind kindness. "Zoe's doing something big," she'd said. "People talk about her like she's the heart of this town now." John had swallowed hard at that. He'd asked too quickly, "Is she married?" His mother had paused before answering. "No," she said, "but she's not waiting, John. Not anymore." That sentence had stayed with him all the way down the highway. She's not waiting. It wasn't an invitation. It was a verdict, and somehow it made his chest ache more than anger ever could. Because if Zoe had moved on completely, then his regret wouldn't just be painful, it would be meaningless. But John didn't return to claim her like a prize. He returned because something inside him had finally collapsed under the weight of what he'd done. The next morning, he went to the hospital. Not because he wanted a dramatic encounter, because he wanted to see, with his own eyes, the life she had built without him. He walked through the automatic doors and felt the sharp, immediate memory of Zoe and Scrubs, moving through hallways with calm authority. The smell of antiseptic and coffee hit him like a wave. He stopped near the reception desk, heart pounding in a way it hadn't in any boardroom. A nurse looked up. Her eyes narrowed with recognition, then widened. In a small town, names don't fade. "John," she said softly, like she wasn't sure she should speak it. John nodded once. He didn't smile. He didn't charm. He just said, "I'm looking for Zoe." The nurse's expression shifted, surprise mixed with something like protective caution. "She's busy," she replied, tone polite but firm. "She runs the outreach unit now." John followed directions down a hallway toward the supply bay. Each step felt heavier than the last. His mind tried to prepare him. But there's no rehearsal for facing the person you abandoned. He reached the double doors and pushed them open. The room smelled like cardboard and disinfectant. Stacks of supplies lined the walls. And there, near the back, Zoe stood with a clipboard in hand, giving instructions to 2 volunteers. She looked different, not in a dramatic way. She was still Zoe. Still that familiar posture, that strong line of her shoulders. But there was something in her eyes now. Something steady, awake, unafraid. Her hair was pulled back, her sleeves rolled up, and her voice carried quiet authority. She was leading. She belonged to this place more than ever. John felt his throat tighten. She looked like a woman who had learned how to live without permission. Zoe turned, sensing movement. For a heartbeat, her face stayed neutral. Then her gaze landed on John. Time did something strange. Like it slowed. Like it held its breath. The room fell quieter, even the volunteers pausing without realizing why. Zoe didn't drop her clipboard. She didn't blink too fast. Her expression didn't shatter. It simply hardened into composure, like a door closing gently but firmly. John opened his mouth, but no words came out. He had practiced apologies in his mind, crafted sentences meant to sound humble, mature, real. But the moment he saw her, all those rehearsed lines dissolved. What remained was raw truth. He had left a woman who deserved better, and she had become better without him. John swallowed and finally managed. "Zoe." She stared at him, her face unreadable, but her eyes, those eyes carried years. Pain, work, growth, survival. Zoe's voice came calm, dangerously calm. "John," she said, as if she were acknowledging a fact, not welcoming a memory. She glanced at the volunteers. "Give me a minute," she told them gently. They nodded and moved away, glancing back like they could feel the electricity between them. John took one step closer and stopped, as if he didn't deserve the space. "I didn't know you were doing all this," he said quietly, gesturing to the supplies, the mobile unit parked outside, the organized chaos of purpose. Zoe didn't smile. "You didn't know," she replied, "because you weren't here." Her words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They landed like a verdict. John's jaw tightened, not with anger, but with the effort of staying upright under truth. "I know," he said. "And I'm not here to pretend I didn't ruin something." His voice softened. "I came back because I finally understood what I traded." Zoe's eyes narrowed slightly. "And what did you trade, John?" she asked. "Be careful. Don't answer like a man who wants forgiveness. Answer like a man who understands the cost." John exhaled slowly, like he was walking into a fire on purpose. "I traded real love for pride," he admitted. "I traded you for a version of myself I thought I needed." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "And I built everything I went to build. But I couldn't build peace." Zoe's face didn't soften. Not yet. She didn't reward confession with comfort. She had outgrown that kind of quick emotional labor. "You don't get to come back and speak like that makes it holy," Zoe said, voice low. "You don't get to hand me regret and expect me to carry it." John's eyes glistened, but he didn't argue. He nodded once. accepting the weight. "You're right," he whispered. "I'm not asking you to carry anything." Then, after a pause that felt like surrender, he added, "I'm asking for a chance to prove I can." Zoe held his gaze, and the room felt smaller, like it couldn't contain what was happening. Outside, the wind rattled the door, cold air slipping in like a reminder that winter was coming. Zoe's voice remained steady, but something flickered beneath it. Memory, pain, and a cautious curiosity she would never admit out loud. "Prove it how?" she asked. "Because I'm not the woman you left, John. If you came back expecting the past, you came back to the wrong door." John didn't answer Zoe's question with a speech. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't try to soften her with nostalgia, didn't use the kind of charm that once made him believe he could fix anything. He simply stood there, breathing carefully like he understood that the wrong word could be another abandonment. "Tell me what you need," he said, voice low. "Not what you used to need, what you need now. And if the answer is nothing, I'll accept that too." Zoe studied him the way she studied a patient who insisted they were fine. Eyes sharp, mind alert, heart guarded. She didn't trust remorse on arrival. She trusted patterns. She trusted consistency. And John, standing in front of her in that supply bay, looked less like a man seeking a second chance and more like a man afraid of being exposed as too late. Zoe lifted her chin slightly. "You can start by respecting my boundaries," she said. "You don't show up in my space and take up air like you still belong here." John nodded once as if her boundary was a gift, not an insult. "Okay," he said. No argument, no wounded pride. That alone startled her, because the John who left had always needed to win the moment. This John looked like he had learned to lose without resentment. Zoe crossed her arms. "And don't use money as a shortcut," she added, voice steady. "If you're here to write checks to ease your guilt, save it." "I don't need your guilt funded." John's mouth parted slightly, then closed again. He didn't look offended. He looked humbled. "I was going to ask how I could help," he admitted. "But you're right. I can't buy my way back into your respect." He paused, eyes flicking toward the mobile unit outside. "Then tell me where to show up, where I can work, where I can be useful, without you owing me anything." The word useful hit Zoe's chest strangely. John had once wanted to be impressive. Now he asked to be useful. Zoe hesitated, not because she wanted to soften, but because she didn't like how sincere he sounded. She pointed toward a stack of boxes labeled outreach supplies. "We leave at 6 tomorrow," she said. "We go out to the Granger farm and then 2 stops farther west. Volunteers load, drive, and help set up." She met his eyes, daring him to flinch. "It's not glamorous. You'll get dusty. You'll follow my instructions. And you won't make this about you." John nodded again. 6, he repeated. "I'll be here." He didn't ask for a guarantee. He didn't ask if she'd talk to him more afterward. He simply accepted the terms like a man who understood that love wasn't something you negotiate back. It was something you earned through presence. Zoe turned back to her clipboard, signaling the conversation was over. John didn't linger. He left quietly, and that quiet felt louder than any apology. The next morning, John showed up at 5:45. The sky was still dark, the air cold enough to sting, and the hospital parking lot glistened with a thin layer of frost. Zoe arrived in her truck and saw him immediately, standing near the mobile unit in a plain jacket, sleeves already rolled up, hands in his pockets like he was keeping himself from doing something stupid. He looked up when her headlights washed over him, and he didn't smile. He simply nodded as if saying, "I meant it." Zoe didn't greet him warmly. She didn't punish him either. She treated him like any other volunteer. Professional, direct. "Grab the boxes," she said, handing him gloves. John pulled them on without complaint. He lifted supplies, stacked them carefully, and followed instructions. When another volunteer struggled with a heavy cooler, John stepped in without making a show of it. The way he worked was quiet, competent, almost reverent. Like he understood that service was the first language Zoe trusted. On the road, the fields rolled past in muted colors, winter-brown grass, leafless trees, fences stretching into distance. Zoe drove. John sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, not trying to force conversation. That silence surprised her more than anything. Years ago, John would have filled the space with explanations, jokes, promises. Now he seemed to understand that silence was not emptiness. It was restraint. It was respect. The Granger farm was bigger than most, with long rows of land and barns that creaked in the wind. Families arrived slowly, boots crunching on gravel, faces cautious but hopeful. Zoe set up stations with practiced ease. John took direction, handed out forms, carried chairs, fetched water. He spoke gently to an older man who kept apologizing for being a bother. John said quietly, "You're not a bother. You're a person. That's enough." Zoe overheard it and felt something uncomfortable tighten in her throat. Mid-morning, a little girl clung to her mother's coat, terrified of getting her finger pricked for a test. Zoe crouched down, voice soft, but the girl's fear held firm. John knelt beside them slowly, careful not to invade. "Hey," he said gently, "do you want to be brave together?" The girl blinked at him. John offered his own finger first. "If you do yours after me, you win." The girl watched him wince slightly as the prick happened. She giggled, then held out her hand. Zoe's chest tightened. John wasn't performing. He was present. Later, Zoe caught him outside behind the unit, standing alone with a cup of coffee, staring at the fields as if he could see time in the distance. She stepped out, not to comfort him, but to keep the work moving. "We'll leave in 20, she said. John nodded, then surprised her by speaking without pleading. "You built something beautiful," he said quietly. "Not because you had to, because you chose to." Zoe held his gaze. "I built it because people were getting left behind," she replied. "I know what that does." John swallowed hard as if her words hit a bruise. "I know," he murmured. And for a second Zoe saw it. The regret that didn't ask to be soothed. The regret that just sat there, heavy and deserved. She didn't soften. But she didn't walk away immediately either. That pause was small, but it mattered. Zoe had learned that healing doesn't happen through dramatic moments. It happens through tiny shifts in how you choose to stay. The second stop was a smaller property with an older couple who lived alone. The man's hands trembled when he signed his name. "We don't get visitors," he admitted. "Not since our son moved away." Zoe smiled gently and continued her work. John carried a heater inside without being asked. He fixed a loose step on their porch with tools from the truck. The woman watched him with watery eyes. "You're kind," she said softly. John's throat bobbed. "I'm trying," he answered. 2 words, simple, honest, and Zoe felt the weight behind them. Back in town, the day ended with exhaustion. Volunteers dispersed, laughing softly, satisfied. Zoe stayed to clean up. John stayed too. He wiped down surfaces, packed unused supplies, and took trash out without being told. When Zoe finally looked up, she realized he had been there for hours without once asking for a reward. That, more than anything, unsettled her, because it suggested he was not here to win her back quickly. He was here to become someone who deserved to be near her at all. As twilight deepened, Zoe locked the storage bay and turned, expecting John to be gone. But he stood a few feet away, hands clasped in front of him like he was holding himself still. "Thank you for letting me help," he said. Zoe's face stayed calm. "I didn't let you help," she corrected. "You showed up, there's a difference." John nodded, accepting the correction like a lesson. Then, "Thank you for not shutting the door in my face." Zoe studied him again, this man with city success in his posture but humility in his eyes. She wasn't ready to believe in his transformation. She wasn't ready to trust, but she couldn't deny what she had seen today. A man who worked without complaining, who comforted strangers, who listened more than he spoke. It didn't erase what he'd done. It didn't pay the debt of the years, but it was evidence. And Zoe had always respected evidence more than promises. John took a breath like he was stepping carefully onto thin ice. "I won't ask you to forgive me," he said quietly. "Not yet. Not until I've earned the right to even hear your answer." He met her eyes with a steadiness that felt new. "But I'm going to keep showing up if you'll allow it." Zoe's throat tightened, but her voice remained firm. "We'll see," she said. "Because showing up once is easy. Showing up consistently, is where truth lives. John kept showing up the way Zoe had warned him he would have to, without announcement, without performance, without demands. The next outreach day, he arrived early again. Then the next. Then the one after that. He learned where supplies were stored, how forms were organized, how to read Zoe's silent signals when a patient needed gentleness instead of efficiency. He didn't try to step into leadership. He stayed in service, as if he understood that humility was not a moment, it was a practice. Zoe didn't reward him with warmth. She rewarded him with observation. In her world, trust wasn't an emotion. It was a record. And every time John showed up when it was inconvenient, when it was cold, when the work was heavy, when no one was watching, Zoe made a note inside herself. Not because she wanted to be won, because she refused to be fooled. The town began to react in layers. Some people greeted John politely, curious. Others met him with quiet resentment, like they didn't appreciate a man returning after the hardest part was over. The older women at the diner watched him with eyes that had seen too many men regret too late. The men at the hardware store nodded stiffly. John didn't argue with any of it. He didn't defend himself. He accepted the discomfort like penance he didn't get to negotiate. Zoe's life stayed full. She didn't rearrange her world around John's return. She still ran meetings, still fought for funding, still worked hospital shifts when emergencies piled up. The difference was that now, in the middle of her busy days, she would sometimes catch the sight of John lifting a box, helping an elderly patient into a chair, holding a door open without speaking, and something inside her would tighten. Not with longing, with confusion, because part of her still expected him to disappear again. One evening in late November, the sky turned the color of iron. The wind sharpened and the weather felt restless, like the earth was warning Willow Creek to brace itself. Zoe was at the hospital finishing paperwork when the first call came in. An accident on a back road, a truck skidding near the farms, multiple injuries. The kind of call that made small-town hospitals move like a single body. Zoe's hands went steady, her mind snapping into that clean focus she trusted. Nurses moved. Doctors called for supplies. The waiting room filled with anxious family members carrying mud and fear into the fluorescent light. Zoe stepped into the chaos like it was familiar ground. Then she saw him, John, walking in through the doors, coat half buttoned, hair damp from the wind, eyes alert. "I heard," he said quickly. "What can I do?" Zoe didn't hesitate. She didn't stop to evaluate motives. In emergencies, you don't have the luxury of pride. "Triage station," she ordered. "We're short on hands. Keep people calm. Move families away from the doors." John nodded and went. No questions, no resistance, no need to be thanked. And something inside Zoe flinched at how natural it felt to give him a task and trust him to do it. The storm arrived fully as the patients did. Rain slapped the windows. Sirens echoed. Mud streaked across the hospital floor. A young farmhand came in with a shoulder injury, trembling, trying not to cry from pain. An older man arrived barely conscious, head bleeding, his wife sobbing as she clutched his jacket. Zoe moved between them, voice calm, eyes sharp. She gave orders, reassured, stabilized, and in the corner of her vision, she kept seeing John, steady, grounded, gently guiding people into seats, offering water, speaking in a quiet tone that lowered panic. At one point, a woman's voice rose, hysterical, accusing, desperate. She was yelling at the staff, demanding answers, demanding control. Zoe stepped forward, but John got there first. He didn't touch the woman. He didn't patronize her. He simply lowered his own voice until she had to listen to hear him. "I know you're scared," he said, "but yelling won't bring him back faster. Let's breathe, and I'll stay right here with you until someone updates us." The woman's shoulders shook. Then she nodded, swallowing her sobs. Zoe watched, stunned by the gentleness John used like he had been trained by suffering. Hours passed. The storm worsened. The power flickered once, twice, then held. Zoe finally stepped into an empty hallway to take a breath, leaning her shoulder against the wall. She felt the exhaustion in her bones, the ache behind her eyes. She closed them for a second too long. When she opened them, John stood at the end of the hall watching her like he didn't want to intrude. He approached slowly. "You okay?" he asked. Zoe gave a small, humorless laugh. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm functioning." John nodded like he understood that kind of strength. He didn't tell her to rest. He didn't offer empty comfort. Instead, he handed her a cup of coffee. "I asked the receptionist how you take it," he said quietly. Zoe stared at the cup as if it might be dangerous. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't flashy. It was attentive, and that attention made her chest tighten in a way she didn't like, because it reminded her of what it felt like to be seen. "You didn't have to do that," Zoe murmured. John's gaze dropped. "I know," he said. "I wanted to." A pause. Then softer. "I didn't used to want to do the small things. I thought big gestures mattered more." He swallowed. "And I was wrong." Zoe looked at him, searching his face. He didn't look like a man trying to impress her. He looked like a man trying to confess to himself. Near midnight, the storm hit the farms harder. A call came in. Mr. Granger's hired hand had been trapped briefly under debris when a section of an old barn collapsed. He was conscious but in shock. The roads were slick, and the ambulance crew requested additional support at the scene. Zoe started to move immediately. John stepped beside her without thinking. "I'm coming," he said. Zoe turned sharply. "No," she said. "This isn't outreach. This is dangerous." John didn't argue. He just held her gaze. "So is living with regret," he replied quietly. "Let me help." Zoe's instinct was to refuse because letting John near danger felt like letting him near her heart. But the hospital needed hands, and the barn site needed calm. Zoe exhaled sharply. "Fine," she said. "But you do exactly what I tell you." John nodded once. "Yes." And the simplicity of his obedience scared her more than stubbornness ever would have. They drove out into the storm in Zoe's truck, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. The road was nearly empty, the fields on either side swallowed by darkness. Inside the cab, the silence was thick. Zoe's hands gripped the steering wheel. John stared forward, jaw tight. Not with arrogance, but with contained fear. Zoe realized suddenly that she had never seen John admit fear before. Not truly. He used to hide it behind ambition, behind certainty. Now it sat openly in the air, and somehow that honesty made him feel more human. At the barn site, men held flashlights while rain poured down their coats. The collapsed beams looked like bones. Zoe moved fast, checking the injured worker, speaking calmly, instructing people where to stand. John followed her directions, steadying a trembling man, holding a light, helping lift a tarp. When a beam shifted unexpectedly, John reacted without hesitation, pulling a younger volunteer back just in time. His shoulder hit hard against a post and he hissed, pain flashing across his face. Zoe spun. "John!" she snapped. He waved it off quickly. "I'm fine," he lied. Zoe stepped closer, eyes sharp, and in that moment her nurse's instinct overruled every boundary she wanted to maintain. She grabbed his arm, pulling his jacket aside. Bruising already darkened his shoulder, and his breath came slightly uneven. Zoe's voice dropped, controlled but edged. "Don't lie to me," she said. John's eyes met hers, wet, exposed, quietly ashamed. "I'm sorry," he murmured. Old habit. Zoe's throat tightened, because old John used to lie about his feelings too. Back in the truck on the way to the hospital, John sat with his injured shoulder, wincing every time the road jolted. Zoe kept her eyes on the road, but her heart wasn't steady. Not because she cared that he was hurt. She would care about anyone hurt. But because she realized he hadn't protected himself tonight. He had protected someone else. And for the first time since his return, Zoe felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not love, but the faint, terrifying beginning of trust. John's shoulder wasn't broken, but it was bruised badly enough that the doctor ordered him to rest for a few days. Rest, however, did not come easily to a man who had returned to Willow Creek with a debt inside his chest. He sat in the exam room with his arm in a sling, staring at the floor like the pain wasn't the injury. It was the memory of Zoe's hands on him, firm and careful, the way she touched him as a nurse, and not as the woman he once loved. That distance was a medicine he deserved. Zoe stayed professional as she checked on him. She monitored his breathing, assessed the bruising, and asked questions with the same calm tone she used with every patient. John answered without trying to steer the moment into emotion. He didn't say, "I missed you." He didn't say, "This proves I've changed." He only said what was true. "It hurts," he admitted, "but I'm okay." Zoe nodded, as if that ended the conversation. In a way, it did. When the doctor left, there was a silence that felt like a room waiting for a confession. John didn't fill it. Zoe didn't either. She stood near the sink washing her hands, back turned, the water running loud. John watched her and realized something with a sharpness that almost made him dizzy. Zoe's strength was no longer built on hope. It was built on boundaries, and boundaries are what remain when love has finally learned self-respect. Zoe turned off the faucet and faced him. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes held stormlight, quiet and dangerous. "Don't mistake what happened tonight for progress between us," she said. "You helped. You were brave. I'm grateful for that." John nodded slowly, taking the words like a gift he wasn't entitled to. Zoe continued, voice steady. "But I need you to understand something. I don't rebuild trust because I feel sorry for you. I rebuild it only if your actions stay consistent when there's nothing dramatic happening." John swallowed hard. "I understand," he said. His voice didn't plead. It didn't demand. It simply carried surrender. Zoe watched him closely, as if she expected him to push back. When he didn't, her eyes narrowed slightly, not with suspicion but with the recognition that he had learned something. She exhaled. "Good," she said. "Because I'm going to be honest with you in a way I wasn't before." Zoe took a step closer, not intimate, just direct. "When you left," she said, "it didn't only break my heart. It changed the way I see people. It changed the way I hear promises." Her voice dipped lower, quieter. "I had to become someone who could survive without needing answers. I had to learn how to be my own closure." John's throat tightened. He looked down, ashamed. Zoe didn't allow him to hide in that shame. "Look at me," she said gently but firmly. John lifted his eyes. Zoe held his gaze with quiet fire. "You don't get to return and ask me to be soft just because you're sorry," she said. "Softness costs. Forgiveness costs. And I paid the first part of that cost alone." John's eyes glistened. "I know," he whispered. "And I hate that you had to." Zoe's voice stayed steady. "Hating it won't change it," she replied. "Only being different will." The next days tested him in smaller ways than storms ever could. John didn't show up to outreach because the doctor told him not to lift heavy things. But he still showed up at the hospital anyway, dropping off supplies, making calls for grant support, using his connections to get better equipment donated anonymously, without attaching his name. Zoe found out by accident when the administrator mentioned a donor who refused credit. Her stomach tightened. A man seeking applause doesn't refuse credit. A man seeking redemption might. Still, Zoe didn't soften. She observed. She watched how John spoke to staff, how he listened when people criticized him, how he stayed polite when someone at the diner muttered, "Too late," under their breath. John didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. He paid for an older couple's meal and walked out without saying a word. Zoe saw the moment through the window and felt a strange ache, because humility, when real, is hard to hate. One afternoon, Zoe found him behind the community center repairing a broken step with one arm in a sling. She crossed her arms, eyebrow raised. "Doctor said rest," she reminded him. John winced slightly, not from pain, more from being caught. "I'm resting," he said, then nodded toward the step. "Just resting with a hammer." Zoe almost smiled, but she stopped herself like it was dangerous. "You don't have to do this," she said, and for the first time her voice carried something softer than steel. John set the hammer down and looked up at her. "I do," he said quietly, "because you were right in that supply room. I can't come back and take up air like I still belong." His gaze held hers. "So I'm trying to earn the right to exist near you again. Not as your past, as someone new." Zoe's chest tightened. She hated how much his honesty pulled at her, like a thread she had tried to cut years ago. Zoe sat on the edge of the steps, careful, controlled. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, and the air smelled like damp earth after rain. "Here are my conditions," she said, voice calm. John's posture stilled. He didn't interrupt. Zoe continued. "No excuses. No disappearing when it gets uncomfortable. No sudden decisions made without conversation. If you're here fully." She turned her head slightly, eyes narrowing. "And you don't get to treat my forgiveness like a finish line." John nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "I won't," he said. "I can't afford to." Zoe's lips pressed together. "And one more thing," she added. John's breath caught. Zoe's voice lowered, more personal now, but still strong. "If you want to be in my life again, you have to respect the life I built without you. You don't get to reshape it around your comfort. You join it as a partner, or you don't join it at all." John swallowed hard, eyes shining. "I respect it," he said. "I admire it." His voice tightened. "I see now that you didn't just survive. You became someone powerful, and I'm not here to make you smaller so I can feel bigger." Zoe stared at him. Those words landed deep, not because they were poetic, but because they were the exact opposite of who he used to be. And Zoe, despite herself, felt something pulse beneath her ribs. Hope, tiny and cautious like a candle held against wind. That evening, Zoe drove out to the edge of town where the fields opened wide. She parked near a fence line and watched the sun dip low, turning the world gold. She thought about John leaving, about the years she spent learning how to breathe without him. She thought about how she had stopped waiting, stopped believing in returns, stopped trusting the universe to bring her closure. And yet here he was, back, bruised, humbled, consistent. Zoe pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her own heartbeat. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't a switch. It was a pulse. A living thing that could grow, if it was fed with truth. Days later, John asked for a conversation in a public place. No pressure, no privacy that could blur boundaries. They sat at the diner where they once shared fries and cheap coffee like it was a feast. The waitress set 2 mugs down with a careful glance. John didn't touch Zoe. He didn't lean too close. He simply looked at her like he had finally learned reverence. "I left because I was afraid," he said. "Afraid of failing. Afraid of being ordinary. Afraid that if I stayed, I'd resent you for the life I didn't build." Zoe's fingers tightened around her mug. Her voice stayed calm, but her eyes shone. "And instead you gave me the life you didn't have the courage to build with me," she said. John nodded, pain crossing his face. "Yes," he whispered. "And the truth is, I did fail. I failed you." He swallowed, voice thick. "But if there's one thing I know now, it's that the only success that matters is the kind that doesn't cost you your soul." Zoe stared at him for a long moment, the diner noise fading into background hum. Then she spoke softly, as if she were admitting something to herself. "I loved you," she said. John's breath caught. Zoe continued, voice steady. "But I loved myself enough to survive without you. So if you're asking for my trust, understand this. It won't be given. It will be rebuilt. Slowly. Carefully." John nodded, eyes wet. "I'll do it," he whispered. Zoe held his gaze, the smallest tremor of softness entering her expression. "Then start with tomorrow," she said, "because that's where real love lives." Tomorrow came like an ordinary day, and that's what made it holy. No storm, no sirens, no dramatic reunion scene that could trick the heart into rushing ahead. Just morning light over the fields, the diner opening its doors, the hospital waking up into quiet urgency. John showed up anyway, early, steady, without expectation. Zoe watched from a distance and felt something unfamiliar. Not fear of losing him again, but fear of letting herself believe. The weeks that followed were built out of small proofs. John attended outreach meetings and sat in the back, letting Zoe lead without correcting, without claiming, without needing to be seen as the hero. When the grant committee asked difficult questions, he offered quiet support, using his expertise only when Zoe invited it. He learned her rhythms, when she needed silence, when she needed a hand, when she needed space to breathe. And Zoe learned something too. Consistency has a language of its own. One afternoon, Zoe stopped by the community center and found John repainting the children's reading room. The walls were half covered in warm color, the smell of fresh paint mixing with the scent of old books. A small group of kids sat on the floor drawing, and John listened to them with full attention, laughing softly when one of them declared a dragon should be purple, because purple is brave. Zoe stood in the doorway unseen for a moment, and her throat tightened. The man she once begged in her mind to return was finally learning how to stay. When John noticed her, he didn't rush to her side. He didn't make the moment about romance. He just lifted his paintbrush slightly, a quiet greeting, and said, "I didn't want them to grow up thinking this room didn't matter." Zoe nodded, eyes shining, and answered honestly, "It matters." She meant the room. She meant the children. And she meant him. But she didn't say that last part yet. She was still learning to let love speak slowly. Near the start of December, the town held its winter fundraiser at the old barn that had been repaired after the storm. Warm lights hung from beams. Homemade pies lined long tables. People wore coats and carried hope like something shared. Zoe arrived with her outreach team and didn't realize John had been working with volunteers for weeks to prepare. When she stepped inside, she froze. Not because of the decorations, but because she saw a banner. Willow Creek Rural Care Expansion. Her project, her dream, her fight. Zoe turned slowly, eyes searching the room until they landed on John. He stood near the back, hands clasped, watching her with a quiet seriousness that felt like reverence. He didn't look proud of himself. He looked proud of her. Zoe's chest tightened and she walked toward him, steps slow as if the floor might shift under emotion. "You did this?" she asked softly. John shook his head. "We did." He corrected gently. "I just used what I have to strengthen what you built." Zoe stared at him, and for a moment the years compressed. The day he left, the nights she cried alone, the mornings she chose to keep going, the way she became strong enough to stop waiting. She swallowed hard. "You could have put your name on it," she said quietly. John's eyes held hers. "That would have made it about me," he replied. "And this was never supposed to be about me. It's about the people you refuse to leave behind." Zoe blinked rapidly, the emotion rising like tide. "And what about me?" she asked, voice almost a whisper. John's breath caught, and for the first time in weeks his composure cracked, not with drama, but with truth. "You're the reason I came back," he said softly. "Not because I thought I could reclaim you, because I couldn't keep living as the man who walked away from you." His voice thickened. "I needed to become someone who could look you in the eyes and not hate himself." Zoe's throat tightened. "And did you?" she asked. John swallowed. "I'm learning," he whispered. "Every day." The fundraiser night moved around them like warm noise. Music, laughter, clinking glasses. But Zoe felt suspended inside something quiet and private. She studied John's face and saw no arrogance, no entitlement. Only a man who had been rebuilt from regret and decided to stay in the rebuilding. Zoe exhaled slowly. "I'm not promising you forever," she said. John nodded immediately. "I know," he replied. "Promise me nothing. Just let me keep choosing you correctly." That sentence hit Zoe like sunrise after years of storm. Not love me, not forgive me, not come back to what we were. Just let me keep choosing you correctly. Zoe looked away for a second, fighting the tremor in her expression. When she looked back, her eyes were brighter. "Okay," she said softly. "Then choose me correctly when it's hard. Choose me when there's nothing to gain. Choose me when you're tired." John's voice was steady. "I will," he said, "because I know what it costs to choose wrong." A week later, the hospital board approved the first phase of Zoe's expansion. It wasn't just funding. It was confirmation that her pain had been transformed into something that would outlive it. Zoe stood outside the hospital after the meeting, winter air burning her lungs, eyes wet with relief. John stepped beside her without touching. "You did it," he said quietly. Zoe shook her head slowly. "I survived it," she corrected, voice shaking. "And I built something from it." John's gaze softened. "That's what redemption looks like," he murmured. "Not erasing the past, turning it into purpose." In the days that followed, Zoe allowed John closer in small ways, letting him drive supplies, letting him sit with her on the porch swing after long shifts, letting his presence exist without always bracing for impact. Sometimes they spoke about practical things, budgets, schedules, outreach routes. Sometimes they spoke about deeper things, fear, pride, loneliness, the quiet shame of realizing you hurt the person you loved. John never demanded comfort for his guilt. He simply offered honesty and stayed. One night, as snow began to fall lightly over Willow Creek, Zoe found herself laughing, truly laughing, at something John said about the diner's mystery meatloaf. The sound startled her, like a forgotten song. John paused, watching her with a tenderness that looked almost painful. Zoe's smile faded into something softer. "Don't look at me like that," she murmured. John's voice was quiet. "Like what?" Zoe swallowed. "Like you're afraid I'll disappear," she said. John's throat tightened. "I'm afraid you'll stop letting me stay," he admitted. Zoe turned toward him fully, the porch light casting warm glow across his face. "Staying isn't the same as being forgiven," she said, voice calm. John nodded. "I know." Zoe's eyes held his. "And forgiveness isn't the same as pretending it didn't hurt." John's gaze dropped. "I know," he whispered again. Zoe reached out, slowly, deliberately, and touched his hand for the first time since his return. The contact was simple, but it felt like a bridge. John's breath hitched. He didn't grab her back. He didn't pull. He let Zoe lead the closeness the way she needed to. "Zoe?" he whispered, voice breaking. She held his hand a little tighter. "If we do this," she said softly, "we do it new. Not as a rewind. Not as a fantasy. As two adults who know what it costs to lose something real." John nodded, eyes wet. "Yes," he whispered. New. New meant truth on ordinary days. It meant John calling when he'd be late, even by 10 minutes, because Zoe's nervous system still remembered abandonment. It meant Zoe telling him when something triggered her, instead of swallowing it to keep peace. It meant John listening without defensiveness. It meant Zoe allowing herself to be cared for without feeling guilty. It meant building trust like a house, beam by beam, until the structure could hold weight. On the first clear morning after the snowfall, John asked Zoe to meet him at the edge of the fields where the sunrise turned the world pale gold. Zoe arrived in a thick coat, hands tucked in her pockets, breath visible in the cold. John stood near a small wooden post in the ground with a plaque attached. Zoe stepped closer and read it. "Willow Creek Mobile Care Unit, in honor of the woman who refused to quit." Her eyes filled instantly. "John," she whispered. He shook his head, voice rough. "It's not about making up for what I did," he said. "I can't." He took a careful step closer. "It's about honoring who you became. Because you deserve to be honored the whole time." Zoe stared at the plaque, then at John, and something inside her finally loosened. Not the memory, not the scars, but the last tight grip of fear. She stepped forward and rested her forehead against his chest just for a moment, as if testing whether he would hold her gently or take too much. John's arms came around her slowly, careful, trembling with restraint. Zoe exhaled into him, and when she lifted her face, her eyes shone with quiet certainty. "I'm choosing you," she whispered. John's voice broke. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving you were right." And when Zoe kissed him, slow, warm, real, Willow Creek felt like a place where love didn't just return. It redeemed. There are endings that look like fireworks, loud, dazzling, finished in a single night. But Zoe's ending didn't arrive that way. It arrived like morning light, slow, honest, inevitable. Because the kind of love that redeems doesn't rush back into the past. It builds a future where the past can finally rest. In Willow Creek, people didn't forget what John did. They didn't rewrite history to make his return feel romantic. They simply watched him, day after day, show up when no one clapped, work when no one praised, listen when no one expected him to. And Zoe, strong, resilient, emotionally awake, didn't forgive because she was lonely. She didn't soften because she needed saving. She forgave the way powerful women forgive, not by erasing pain, but by refusing to let pain keep ruling the story. John learned that success can fill a bank account and still leave the heart bankrupt. He learned that pride can buy you distance, but only humility can bring you home. So he stopped asking Zoe to trust his words. He started giving her proof, in how he stayed, in how he served, in how he chose her correctly, even when it was hard. The outreach unit expanded that winter. New equipment arrived. More nurses were hired. Farms that once felt forgotten became stops on a map of dignity. And every time Zoe saw a family breathe easier because someone cared in time, she felt her own healing deepen. Not because love returned, but because love finally partnered with purpose. On a quiet evening, after a long day of planning and paperwork, Zoe and John sat on her porch swing beneath warm lights. Snow fell softly, like the world was whispering instead of shouting. John didn't push the moment. He didn't try to steal romance from her like he once stole time. He simply reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Not flashy, not theatrical, just honest. Zoe's breath caught, but her eyes didn't fill with naive hope. They filled with something deeper. Discernment, meeting devotion. "I won't ask you to believe in me because I'm sorry," John said quietly. "I'm asking you to believe in me because I've changed, and I'm willing to spend my whole life proving it." Zoe stared at him for a long moment, the kind of moment that holds every year you survived alone. Then she reached for his hand, steady, warm, real. And she said the words that weren't rushed, weren't fragile, weren't borrowed from a fantasy. "Yes, but we keep building." John exhaled like a man finally forgiven by the only person he ever truly wanted to be worthy of. He slid the ring onto her finger, hands trembling, not with fear of losing control, but with reverence for what he was being trusted with. Zoe leaned in first, and when she kissed him, slow, certain, unafraid, it didn't feel like she was going back to the man who left. It felt like she was stepping into a love that had been rebuilt from the ground up, stronger than nostalgia, braver than pride, and finally mature enough to hold what it once broke. Because sometimes the real miracle isn't that he returns, it's that she stopped waiting and still found a love worth choosing again. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been left, rebuilt yourself in silence, and wondered if love could still be real, then don't leave without doing this. Comment, "I choose me," if you're learning to stop waiting for what keeps hurting you. And comment, "Second chance," if you still believe God can redeem what looked impossible. Then like this video so more hearts find this story, share it with a woman who needs hope, and subscribe to Redeemed Hearts, because the next story might be the one that helps you believe in love again. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive him after years? Or would you walk away?